everyone. As you know, I played the MOCs challenge, maybe you know, this weekend. I didn't do so hot. I won only 5 and 3. I thought it was only 8 rounds, and ended up being 9 rounds, so I didn't get any prizes, but it's okay. And I played this white-green Heliod, Celestial Heliod deck with Scales. And you know, afterwards we had a very good conversation with MTG Bullen, who's a member of the Hardened Scales Discord. And I think he did better than me. He went 6 and 3, but he was at some point 5 and 1. So really did pretty well. He had a game against Fablush, Argentinian Amigo Titan player. I'll try to remember to link that in the description so you can watch the deck, let's say, from the other side. Quite interesting. I must say he's very skilled with his collecting companies, but that's it. So basically, this is not exactly the deck I played in the tournament, but you know, after what I learned from the tournament, talking to him, this is kind of the list I arrived to. That's the list I will be probably trying going forward. And I will kind of give I will make it maybe a bit longer of introduction this time, kind of giving a Decktech, maybe explaining like sideboard plans and strategies versus different of the most common matchups. You have it here and you can maybe rewatch. So let's start first how the deck works, right? Like I like to start decks, so kind of explaining the purpose of the deck. This deck is fundamentally a Heliod Sun Crown deck that basically uses all the rest of the counter synergies that are also inbuilt with Heliod to basically win the game. So Heliod, if you don't know, it's an indestructible god, comes in as an enchantment unless you have 5 devotion or 2 white or more. And then whenever you gain life, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature. So you're already gaining life and counters, and makes good sense in a deck, right? And then you can give lifelink to a creature by paying 2. You can give lifelink to many other creatures, even the opponent's creatures. You can destroy Phantasmal Image with this. Or you can, for example, give lifelink to a Scourge of the Skyclaves, and then it kills itself when it hits you, things like this, right? Like, there are some nice uses for that, but most of the time you will just give lifelink to one of your creatures, and it cannot give lifelink to itself. So how this deck works is that it uses this ability with Heliod and the Spike Feeder. The Spike Feeder is like, let's say, the second key to the deck. Spike Feeder comes in as a 2/2 with like 2+1/+1 counters on, and of course it grows with Hardened Scales, and then it has a couple of abilities. First one is well, the second one is most relevant. You remove a counter from Spike Feeder, and this can be done at instant speed, of course, and you gain 2 life. And if you have a Heliod and a Spike Feeder in the battlefield, then when you remove a counter, you gain 2 life, and then Heliod triggers, and you can put a counter back on Spike Feeder effectively, and then the next time you can do this again, and effectively you can gain infinite life. MTGO, on real life, you could say, okay, I will gain now 10,000 life. Then that's it. And most of the time your opponent will concede. But in MTGO, because you have to actually click manually through the combo, you will generally not scoop to the combo. So it kind of makes the deck, because just gaining infinite life is not enough to actually on paper if people will actually play off if it's an important enough event, right? So how do we win the game then when we have had infinite life? If you have any of our scales effect, and there's 2 Hardened Scales, the card, and 4 Conclave Mentors in the deck, so we have total 6 effects of Hardened Scales. Then every time we complete this cycle, so we remove a counter, then we put a counter. Instead of putting 1 counter, put 2 counters, right? So the Spike Feeder will actually become larger and larger and larger and larger, eventually becoming infinitely larger, or 1000, 1000 if we want. Normally in MTGO, I click it to be at 2020. But then what is even better than this is that then you can make any creature you control on the battlefield also infinitely large, because you can minus a spike. Let's say you make a Spike Feeder at 30/30, you gain 60 life on the process. And then you can remove a counter from Spike Feeder, gain 2 life, and then put a counter with Heliod onto another creature. So basically, all the creatures you have at that point become infinitely large creatures. And then, of course, it's a very fast way to win the game. So that's what I recommend. That is the reason to play Hardened Scales and to play Conclave Mentor. And Conclave Mentor is kind of the glue to the deck. Before this deck Conclave Mentor was printed, it was more played like a devoted counters combo, but you would have Kitchen Things, you would have Viscera Seer, you have a lot more other cards. And to be honest, those cards, they're not that good on their own. Like you have an Offensa. The Conclave Mentor is just perfect for the deck. It's not only an Hardened Scales effect, which is already very strong, but when it dies, it gains life. So again, if it dies, you have a Heliod, you can put a counter or whatever, and it gains life based on its power. So the bigger it becomes, the more life you will gain when it dies. So this actually has a lot of good synergy, of course, with the rest of the deck. And you know, just in general, it keeps you alive. So I think one of the things right now in Modern is that there's a lot of very, very fast decks. And priority number one when you're building a deck right now is like, how am I going to stay alive for the first 4 turns? I'm playing versus a Shadow deck. Conclave Mentor helps in that regard, as well as fitting into our combo. And okay, let's explain. Then finally, I guess these are the payoffs of the deck. I'm starting the deck at the reverse, but this is like kind of the reason to play all the other cards is this. Heliod Spike Feeder, Conclave Mentor, and then another combo you can have with Heliod is Walking Ballista. If Walking Ballista is a 2-2, and I will explain now a few ways you can make it a 2-2. Of course, you can make it a 2-2 by casting it for X equals 1 and having a Scales out. Then it will be a 2-2. You can cast it for X equals 2 and then it will be a 2-2. Or, and that's one good one that Bullen pointed out, if you attack with a Walking Ballista and you have a Noble Hierarch, then this Exalted Trigger will go on the stack. Then this will be a 2-2 with a 1-1 counter on. And then you can give it lifelink and this actually be enough to kill your opponent, right? Because it will not die despite not having 1-1 counters on. So Heliod, basically, with Ballista, if you have a 2-2 Ballista, you can give it lifelink, so you need 6 mana for that, or 4 mana with that. You have a Scales effect, that's why you're playing Scales. And then you give lifelink to the Ballista, and then it will basically deal infinite damage to your opponent, because every time you remove a counter to deal 1 damage to your opponent, you gain 1 life. Triggering Heliod, it can put another counter on the Ballista, and you can do that for 20 times until you... There are currently... And then to tie everything together, we have Collected Company. Collected Company finds all our combo pieces, finds all our creatures except Walking Ballista, but it finds Ranger-Captain of Eos. And it's an instant that works really well against control decks, and it's basically 2 for 1 if you get 2 creatures on the battlefield. So Collected Company, kind of the, I want to say, the main enabler, so the main payoff to the deck. So it's not a direct payoff, but it's what allows us to play all these cards. You know, basically Collected Company looks at 6 cards. It's actually quite deep. So if you're missing one of the pieces of the combo, it's quite likely you'll find it with Collected Company. Much stronger to play Collected Company than play something like Eladamri Skull. Find the card and then you need to cast it, and this puts it directly into the battlefield. And to kind of go with all of this, we built the deck to have a certain consistency together. Oh, I'm not muted. So first I will start with the line. So what it enables the deck to work, you know, we know the combo, we know how we get the combo into the battlefield. So what allows the deck to work is the mana base, of course. 21 lines, all of them untap, all of them tap for color. It's something I changed from the list you will see in the games. I had a Governing Township, and you know, it just not tapping for color is just not good enough, right? It just really, like, you need to be tapping for color. You look, you have quite a strict mana requirements, like green white on Conclave Mentor. We have single white, single green, which is also white heart, double white and colorless, double white and colorless, and double green and colorless. So we have a variety of mana costs, and all of them are very strict. So all the mana taps for color. And basically this deck doesn't necessarily have to be built like this with all the fetch lands. And this is maybe this could be optimized to play something like Razorbait's Ticket, and play something like maybe what's it called then? Not Brushlands, Wooded Bastions, to make the mana easier. But again, Wooded Bastions is tap for green turn 1, which is kind of a big deal. And but the mana base is like this because you will see in the games I'm playing Arbor Elf and the PS Pro. This is a fantastic combination, works really well into the deck. Was one of the main innovations I made into the deck when I first started playing it. But it has one of the top decks right now is Death and Taxes. Did pretty well in this tournament. It plays 4 Ghost Quarters, sometimes even 4 Fields of Ruin. That means you do PS Pro, it feels really, really bad. And also the control decks play Cleansing Wildfire and they play Field of Ruin. So a lot of times the Utopia Sprawl will not be as safe as we want it to. If it's a meta game but there's no Ghost Quarter, also Titan decks play Ghost Quarter, right? So a lot of ways that Utopia Sprawl can go wrong right now. And even though there's not that many Lava Darts as they used to be, when there was Red Blood Prowess was the top deck, now it's more like the Death Shadow Prowess decks. And there's some Renin 6, and Renin 6 is just a beating. But I think the conversation went that we probably can get away without playing the Arbor of Utopia Sprawl, just because it seems that Utopia Sprawl, the reason you play Utopia Sprawl in a deck because it's less susceptible to removal than a Mana Dork. But when people are playing so many Ghost Quarters, Fields of Ruin, Cleansing Wildfires, all that stuff, Spreading Seas, I'm guessing there's some Merfolk player out there that will be playing the Force Spreading Seas, Tectonic Edges, all that. You really don't want your PS Sprawl to be so vulnerable, right? So we got those, and we add the more commonly played Noble Hierarchs and 3 Birds of Paradise. So the reason we're choosing these Mana Dorks is because they tap for white. And Noble Hierarch has Exile, which is fantastic in the deck. As I said, it combos with Walking Ballista, but in general makes a lot of... And we're generally not attacking with a lot of creatures, so it's just nice value. Longgiver Runes is a recent inclusion to the deck. I had it before, I cut it for this tournament, I kind of regretted it now. It doesn't die to Lava Dart, so it's a perfect 1-drop to keep in your deck if there's a Lava Dart deck you're playing against, because normally I would tend to cut a lot of my 1-drops versus a Lava Dart deck. And, you know, just the protection can make can protect your combo, can, you know, make your opponent's removal awkward, can point, like, for example, Path to Exile versus to a Giver of Runes, which is fantastic. In general, really good card, and good to have access to one of this feature. Then we have the 2-drops. 2-drops are kind of, for Conclave Mentor, as I said before already, kind of the glue that kind of made the deck when it was printed. Really, really strong card, and really cool, I must say. It was kind of out of the blue, they printed this, and happy with it. 3 Auriok Champions, there's a lot of Death Shadow decks right now, and even the reason we're playing Auriok Champion over other cards like it, or why we're playing the main deck, is because there's a lot of Death Shadow deck, but also our deck can afford to play Auriok Champion in the main deck because it takes so much advantage of life gain. So Heliod takes advantage of life gain, but basically us keeping ourselves at a high life total, we have more time to combo, right? But specifically Heliod likes the double white on Auriok Champion, and every time you play a creature, anybody puts a creature on the battlefield, when you have an Auriok Champion and Heliod will trigger, so Auriok Champion will trigger, gain a life, and then Heliod will trigger and put a counter on. That means the Auriok Champion can grow really, really big, really fast. Another interaction with life is a Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze can eat things from the graveyard, gain life, put a counter on itself, and then you have Heliod will put another counter on itself, effectively working as a Scales. It gets quite ridiculous. You have Scales, Heliod, and Scavenging Ooze because you put 3 counters every time you eat something from the graveyard, and making this a massive. I played 3 on the challenge. I had to cut 1 for the 1 Skyclave Apparition now. The reason is they want to have a main deck answer to some cards their opponents could have that are stopping us. Also, Skyclave Apparition is really good right now versus all these 1 mana cost 13/13s people are playing. So in general, I just had to cut 1 Scavenging Ooze for 1 Skyclave Apparition. And yeah, basically I could see myself going back to 3 Scavenging Oozes. I could see myself basically these numbers are kind of flex slots. These are not the core of the deck. The core of the deck is Heliod, Conclave Mentor, Spikefield, Collected Company. Then 2 Ballistas, at least I would say, Score, and Ranger-Captain. And Ranger-Captain is the final 3 that I have not talked about. Basically an enabler. It does enable the combo by looking for Walking Ballista, and it can also look for one of our 1-drops, and it can sacrifice itself to protect the combo. So it's really a 1 card does it all in this deck. One of the old starts, and I really like it much more in this setup like I did, and not in the games I played, because you have Giver of Runes, which is always a card we'll keep in most of the matchups, even the matches we're cutting the elves. I guess they're not the birds and the Noble Hierarchs. So we always have targets for it. In general, it's a really good card. Not super against Lightning Bolt. Feels a bit bad to lose a Ranger-Captain to a Lightning Bolt because it's a big investment in mana, but it's a fantastic hit of your Collected Company. Specifically making a Collected Company 3/4/1. Some matchups is just very hard for opponent to. 3 Ballistas. I could see myself playing 2 Ballistas and a second Scavenging Ooze. Sorry, a third Scavenging Ooze. That's all the variation you can have. But I've been liking Ballista. And the more Ballistas you have, the more chances you have to combo. And with 2, a lot of times I found myself that when I'm cutting the birds and nobles, I was running out of targets very quickly. And one of the considerations you need to have when you build this deck is you need to keep an eye of how many creatures you have in the deck. If you go anything below 25 creatures, not counting the Ballistas, right now we only have 30 creatures. You are going to be in trouble hitting Collected Companies consistently. You're only going to hit Collected Companies around 85% of the time. Now with 30 creatures here with all the nobles and stuff, that should make it so we are pretty much always hitting, not always, but 90% of the time hitting 2 creatures. Even though it's a noble or birds, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's better to hit a Noble or a Bird than nothing, so I would rather keep Auriok Champion and Noble than only Auriok Champion. And Noble Hierarch, as I said, has some utility in the sense of Exalted, but Birds of Paradise also flies, so it can be decent to block flyers, but most importantly, it can gain infinite damage and attack like as an infinitely large unblockable creature on the air, right? Unblockable as long as open. Yeah, so Collect the Company much better in this version than it is in the Arbor Elf version because you play 4 UTPS pros, then your gun goes down to something like 28, and then -3 ballistas, you're very close to 75 features, which is really too tight. I mean, sometimes then, because what happens in the post-cyborg games, and we're gonna go over it right now, is that you tend to bring in some non-creature spells. So you can see all of these is non-creature spells. There are 9 of them. So if you bring in, let's say you are just at the borderline 25, and you bring in 3 Paths to Exile, and you cut 3 Birds of Paradise, then you're at 22 creatures, and you're not going to hit a Collected Company. You know, Collected Company is very important. That and it feels really bad to cut Collected Companies out of the deck because one of the main reasons to play the deck is to play Collected Company, right? So the idea here is that thanks to this configuration, you can actually more easily swap some creatures for some spells, and I would say don't go below 26 if you want to be very consistent. I'm more targeting towards consistency, but if you don't want to go below 26, I think that's a good target to aim for. 26, not counting ballistas. And one tip you can have on sideboarding is you can always sideboard out 1 ballista, especially post-board games. If you know ballista is not great in zone, like it's very good, for example, versus humans. But if you're not playing against humans, you're playing against maybe the shadow deck. You know, ballista maybe is not the greatest on its own, so then you can just cut 1, and then you just have an extra slot for a spell that matters. Now let's talk a little bit sideboarding. Sideboarding with deck. Finally, just before we go to sideboarding, Horizon Canopy. I'm playing 3 of them. It's a lot, but I've really been liking the card a lot. And the reason is we tend to run out of gas sometimes, and you know, just having this 1 extra card could do a lot for us. And the life total doesn't really matter. We have so many ways to gain life that, you know, like even versus a burn deck, we just play Auriok Champion. We undo the damage really quickly. I drew off the canopy many times. I feel like every match I was drawing off it 2-3 times, and it dealt maybe 1 damage to myself because I was like rapidly kind of capping the amount of mana I could use, and then I was just cycling it. Maybe it's better when you have the PS Pro because you can generate more mana with Arbor Elf. But yeah, this is the setup I have right now. I could also see myself cutting another fetch land and adding a Razorred's Ticket, for example. But I like this configuration. It's relatively more important than you think to empty your library with this deck, because basically Collected Common is a numbers game. The more creatures you have left in the deck, and you actually do fetch for a lot of creatures with Ranger-Captain, the more creatures you have in your deck, the more likely is you're hitting. So if you're fetching out 3 lines of your deck with the fetch lands, let's say over the game, then your Collected Commons actually get sensibly more probable that you will hit, right? If all you're doing is emptying your library of creatures with Ranger-Captain of Eos taking, for example, Giver Runes, and Collected Company putting 2 creatures out of the top 6 in your deck, eventually, as the game goes long, your ratio lands to creatures starts to become more like this, and then it's very hard to hit a powerful Collected Company, and most likely when you need it the most. So also, yeah, one of the reasons that the Horizon Canopy is good is because it's a land that can turn into something. But of course, you always want to keep it to at least 4 mana. So Horizon Canopy starts being cycled when you have 4 lands. Or you have 0 action. But if you have 4 lands, then the Horizon Canopy can just become a 5th, basically become a card, and then you still have 4 lands to cast all of your spells. When you're fetching, I would really consider fetching Temple Garden if you don't think life will be important in the matchup, because since there are so many strict mana costs, like for example, there's some turns you want to play an Auriok Champion and a Spike Feeder, and if you have like 2 Forests, 1 Temple Garden, and 1 Horizon Canopy, and for example, this was a terrible example. You have 2. You want to play Auriok Champion, you want to play Heliod, and you have 2 Forests, 2 Temple Gardens, then or like 3 Forests, 2 Forests, 1 Plains, 1 Temple Garden, something like this. So you don't have like the 3 white sources that you need. You will be in trouble. So I always recommend fetching Temple Garden when you. Also, leaving the basics in your deck means that if people pass you, so we're playing many basics. On to the sideboard. Sideboarding, I think I can do. I mean, you guys can see the cards, right? so I'll just skip it. So these are the non-creatures and these are the creatures. And I'm just going to explain quickly why the cards are here. Path to Exile is for the creature matchups, specifically the Shadow matchups, but also versus Titan matchups. Even though Path to Exile is not great against Titan matchups, but sometimes it's better to, they get a land and then they get a Titan, right? Path to Exile is also good against, it's fantastic against humans, it's fantastic against Eldrazitron if you ever find that deck again, etc. 2 Damping Spheres are for like the draw matchups specifically, but also some other combo matchups like Storm, like Ad Nauseam. Damping Sphere is just a good safety valve, to have. I used to have 3, but since this match is becoming less popular, I'm only playing 2. Against Titan, you can bring them in, but be careful because a lot of times Titan players will play around it. So don't expect that because you have a Damping Sphere out, you will not face a Titan. You could face a Titan, but you can surprise them always versus a Titan to play in Damping Sphere after they have Summer's Pact. If I'm not planned accordingly, they may actually not have green sources because bounce land stop for colorless. Then one Dromoka's Command, this card has been in and out of the deck a lot, but it just it actually is really good. It's really good against Titan decks. It's really good creature decks. It's really good against Blood Moon. It's really good against anybody that wants to play any enchantments against you. It's also great again in the mirror because you can make them sacrifice Heliod. It's in general a strong card. I don't think you will bring it versus Prowess or Control, but in a lot of matchups this card really shines. And also it can prevent all damage that Missile Sorcery spell would deal, so you can actually prevent Kozilek's return. Very important. So maybe it is worth bringing versus. Then Veil of Summer, I don't think it needs a lot of introduction. It's one of the best cards versus targeted black removal and blue counter spells. Specifically talking about Armage's Charm here, that also can steal a Ballista, fire list, and Cryptic Command. And especially if you're playing against any version that plays Esper or any version that plays any blue-black, anything. If you're playing against blue-black deck, rogue decks I've seen, inverter decks, whatever, Veil of Summer is fantastic, but also against shadow decks, Gristy shadow decks, this card is just also against John. So this card against everybody that wants to play black, and a lot of the blue decks as well. Just make sure that the blue decks are not signing out a lot of their counter spells to bring in a lot more removal. A lot of times actually versus this version of the deck, this doesn't happen in normal skills, but this version of the deck, they will keep in things like Force of Negation because they're very afraid of Collected Company. Which is actually good for us. If they're keeping Force of Negation and all they can counter is Collected Company, they're happy. And One Guy's Blessing is for the Meal matchup. Meal can be pretty tough because since we're kind of trying to combo, if they say like put a Heliod on the side on the graveyard and then stacked it, maybe we just don't have enough gas to beat them before they mill us, right? One Guy's Blessing kind of solves the matchup on its own. It's nice to pay, you almost never bring it in, but the one time you play against Meal and you win the game just because you milled this, then you're happy. One thing I've changed from this list you will see after this to this list is I try to increase the number of creatures I have on my sideboard and the number of one-offs because yeah, I just felt like I had way too many non-creatures, so I was always making my deck very awkward post-board, and you will see me struggle a lot, try to keep this 25, 24 creatures and then missing some companies and everything. I think this version of the deck is much more solid, and that's the version I recommend. That's why I'm making the deck on this version, not the old version, which I think is not so good. So like the one-offs, I have 2 extra Skyclave Apparitions. These are good in the creature matchups. These are good in matchups where people may have Snaring Breach. Good versus people that may have basically anything. Like this card is just really good combo decks. Like for example, you're playing against Ad Nauseam, you can exile Phyrexian Unlife, you can exile the prismatic thing. You can, against, and in the exiles, and the return is so bad that you don't care against, basically against the Prowess decks, you exile Soulscar Mage and basically they get a 1/1 back, which can trigger Auriok Champion. And by the way, all this card is really good. It's one of the best cards from Zendikar Rising, and it's just better than Knight of Autumn. Like just the fact that it can, you can play Knight of Autumn for the live game, but most of the time you just want to remove a permanent that's a problem, like a Death Shadow, and also exile Uro. You can exile Jason Mind Sculpture. You can see there's many uses. That's great. Forge-Tender. This is here because in the Lavadar matchups, I tend to cut almost every single mana dork, and then your Ranger-Captain of Eos becomes very awkward because you don't have a lot of Walking Ballistas. You only have one giver rune, so then at some point you actually maybe cut even one Kill Ballista. And then basically you have more Captains of Eos than cards you can find, and then you end up, and you don't really want to cut Captains of Eos because they also give you Devotion for Heliod. Basically, also short, Burrenton Forge-Tender makes this card, makes Heliod better, like, Ranger-Captain better in the matchups where you're going to cut your birds. It also has this special ability that you can prevent all damage a red source of your choice will deal this turn, so this could be permanent, but it also can be something like an Anger of the God. Nice protection too. One Aven Mindcensor, this is for the Titan matchups. I added this recently again, and it's nice because we can, and it's also versus the Tron matchups. It just solves a lot of matchups. On the play, it can be good versus control decks that are like looking to fetch a lot. On the draw, I will not bother in the versus control decks. But it's also versus Titan decks is really fantastic because if they Summoner's Pact and you react with this, especially if they had done like something like Summoner's Pact for an Azusa, and then you have Aven Mindcensor in response and they don't find Azusa, which they will not most of the time because they only have played like 2 or 3. You only look at the top 4, then you are great. Okay. One Archon of Emeria, I had an Idol of Rhetoric. I'm undecided which I like better. This also has some uses versus like Tron decks. It has some uses, of course, versus combo decks and versus decks that play a lot of non-basics. I'm not sure which one is better. The flying could be relevant. Again, you can make it infinitely large and kill somebody. And finally, one Phyrexian Revoker. It's for all the things you don't know how to catch otherwise. We're talking elves here. We're talking Arm the Great Creators. We're talking Blast Zones, Planeswalkers, Ballistas. You can name Ballistas if your opponent has Ballistas. You know, you can name a bunch of things. There's a variety of things you can do with this. Even you can name elves and stuff like this so they can tap for mana. In general, this is not a card that is super powerful, but it has its moments. You know, you can bring it in and it can stop some key interaction your opponent may have. Just, you never know. Like, so many things in Modern that it's good to have a bit of a wide spectrum of cards that can deal with something. Maybe not, I would not play it if I was playing the MOCs again, because everything I played was humans, prowess, the one control deck. That's it. So probably this would be a third Bale or something. But in general, if you want to play this deck in your FMM or you want to play it on leaks, Phyrexian Revoker is the way to go. My door is ringing. Anyway, this is kind of the sideboard and basically how you want to sideboard the deck in general. So versus a prowess deck, you want to be cutting probably the Birds of Paradise and even some of the Noble Hierarchs, and you want to be bringing in the Path to Exiles, the Veils, and maybe a Dromoka's Command if you feel they have caused Lexer turn, and maybe a Burrenton Forge-Tender and the Skyclave Apparition. So you bring in all the removal. You don't need to worry too much about the. So this is what I will bring. What I'm putting in the middle is what I will bring versus Shadow. I wouldn't bring in the Veils unless, because a lot of times they will cut some of the Thoughtseize maybe. They will not all the time cut it, but you can see it's 7 cards, so you want to actually cut a hefty amount of your birds. You could actually cut all your birds, if especially playing Lavar. If they're not playing Lavar, this is still fine. This feels kind of bad. And you still have enough creatures, but you can always cut one Walking Ballista, and you can even cut some Hardened Scales. Because Hardened Scales only really helps you with comboing. Not a lot of cards that put counters on things, except like Feeder, Scavenging Ooze, Walking Ballista, Heliod. So sometimes you can get away with cutting a couple of Hardened Scales. So these are the cards I would bring in, and I would cut the Nobles, the Birds, and yeah, basically you could cut one Walking Ballista, keep one Noble in the play, for example. But on the draw, it feels extremely bad. If you're in any like even if they just fat up push it. If you play Noble turn, like especially on the draw, let's say they start like one Stage Sphere hit you. Turn 2, you play Noble. Like turn 1, you play Noble. Turn 2, they Fatal Push the Noble. Fatal Push the Noble. Play Armor Sphere. So then they hit you for 4. And then you're so behind on tempo, it's just not worth it. It's much better to have like things that can deal with their creatures and maybe not start so fast. But definitely that one is one of the matchups that suffers from not having you. I would probably start by cutting the 3 birds, 200 scales, 1 Walking Ballista, and try to see if you can fit one of these. Then versus control decks, you want the Veils. You want the. I'm gonna put them here on the side. On the play, you would like the Aven Mindcensor and the Archon of Emeria. I think both of them in the play make a lot more sense. On the draw, they don't make so much sense. And then, unless they're playing a heavy Euro deck or a Stoneforge deck, if they're playing Stoneforge, I would play Path. If they're not playing Stoneforge, I don't think I would bother. I just try to outgrind them, you know. Like, these cards can protect your combo. You can even bring a Phyrexian Revoker if you're afraid of some specific interaction. But in general, you want to rely on the Scavenging Oozes, cut the Auriok Champions, maybe cut the Skyclave Apparition. Sometimes it's pretty awkward. If your plan is to play this when they have a Uro, a lot of times this will be countered. So maybe it's just not that good. And just kind of try to go all in the combo while disrupting them with these two cards. That's kind of my strategy. You could also bring in the Dromoka. Then these are the two main decks you will find right now. Versus the Titan decks, you want the Paths. You want Aven Mindcensor. You sometimes want this. They're playing, especially against Amulet Titan, because they're playing Summoner's Pact. And you could, for example, collect the company after the Summoner's Pact, and if you get this, it's like, okay. And you maybe also want the Apparitions to deal with the Dryads, and Dromoka's command to deal with the Dryads. That's quite a lot of things to bring in. And what I would cut here is anything that doesn't. I would cut the Scavenging Ooze, probably cut the Auriok Champions, so a lot of the 2-drops, and probably cut the Giver of Runes as well, and maybe even probably not cut any of the combo. And basically, maybe then you need to realize which one of these cards are more worth it. Probably don't bring in all the paths to exile, right? So you cut 7 cards and you bring 7 cards. And of course, there's some tuning you can be done to the deck to fit your mana. And then the rest of the deck just kind of is the same. If it's a black deck, you want to have the Bale. If it's a black deck with creatures like John, you want to have Bales and Paths. If it's humans, okay, humans is another one that's very common right now. So I would play these humans. So this is what I will bring in versus humans. So 6 creatures. And I will probably cut some amount of Auriok Champions, maybe leave 1 in. You definitely want the Ballista, you want the Hardened Scales. The Giver of Runes doesn't seem so important. But yeah, this is what I will be bringing versus humans, right? So probably cut, even sometimes the Scales can be a bit awkward if you don't have like a lot of Ballistas. So that I would probably cut that as well. But yeah, cutting both the Oozes and the Auriok Champions versus the human matchups makes sense, and also the Giver of Runes. So you could cut these 5 and this one and bring in removal and this. And you basically, even though you're cutting 6 creatures, you just have such a high number of creatures, and you bring in 2 more, you'll still have 29 creatures, which with the Ballista will mean you still have 26 targets for your Collector Common, which is still pretty strong. And you actually make your Collector Common slightly better because you have more of the high impact. Anyway, this is the long deck kind of sideboard planning explanation how the deck works, everything. So I'll put this together, first match of the MOCs, and I hope you enjoy it. If you like the content, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, see you guys in the next one.